We are feeling alive for episode 55 of The Next Best Bet, and that's because I've taken another trip around the sun. It is my birthday on Monday, June 29th here on The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy, and we got some sports betting to talk about because we got a preview for the MLB, NBA, NHL coming up, and it's going to be a perfect time for our Beginners Boulevard turn, Brett. But before we do that, we got a little bit of a recap with hindsight with Higgins here.
Yeah, happy birthday, man. We wore matching shirts to celebrate the occasion. It was beautiful. And I won some NASCAR bets on Sunday so I could buy you a present. Like, wow, what a great weekend.
Well, I'm wearing the blue because I'm a little bit sad at the amount of losses I had of what I gave out. I went 2-5 on my picks. Bryson DeChambeau, he nearly gave me another win. I had him finishing in the top 5 at the plus 250 wager. He tied for 6th, one stroke away from getting 5th, and then my UFC was not great at all. I gave that out on our social media, by the way. If you don't follow us, the handles are right above us. Next Best Bet Facebook page, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the NBB Pod on Twitter. Those are our three. Also, make sure to subscribe and like our YouTube channel as well while you're at it. Next Best Bet on YouTube. But Brett, you did well with your NASCAR bets. You had DiBenedetto and Byron finishing in the top 10, and they were right next to each other.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a tricky track, but if you notice tendencies, those that start in the front typically end in the front, and they started pretty high up. So I said, those odds are worth the risk, and it paid out nicely for me.
And we talked about this on episode 54. Pocono Raceway is my home track. The Poconos are where I grew up, actually. So I enjoyed watching that back-to-back days on Saturday and Sunday. We'll see if the NASCAR decides in future years to start doing some of these back-to-back events. It seemed like some of the racers really liked it. It added an extra challenge in a sense because if you didn't race the same car from Saturday on Sunday, you went to the back of the pack. So there were some racers that had to change out transmissions, do different cosmetic work, and they had to get moved to the back of the start because of it.
Yeah, it definitely affected some starting positions, but I'm more curious. Did you see your house at all on TV?
I
Uh,
did not, no.
no, they didn't show your house from the blimp.
Not quite. No, I live a little too far away to catch the blimp, given my house of view. But it was nice to see a familiar track, see some familiar faces. I did recognize a few on there. But let's get into our Beginners Boulevard. I think it's about time that we talk about some futures, Brett. We've talked about this before for some of our early Next Best Bet listeners, but we're going back around on some of these terms. A future is a bet on a wager that finishes sometimes in the not immediate future. And by not immediate future, I mean you're not picking a single game that happens tonight, tomorrow, by the end of the week. A future is it's typically picking how a team's going to do with an entire season, how a player is going to do in terms of MVP rankings or something like that. Futures are more out in the distance types of bets that a lot can factor in with.
Yeah, I don't. I typically don't bet too many futures. I do like dabble occasionally. I take half units, maybe even less than that, maybe like 0.25 units, because it's a long time for them to hold on to your money. To be honest,
It really is. It
and
really is.
and sometimes COVID strikes, and they're just holding on to your money, and then you get a refund, like Jake.
Yes, that did happen with my Atlanta Braves over 90.5 wins that I had given out on the podcast back in, what, February was that?
Yeah, it
Well,
was
they
like the
gave
last
me
week of February for us.
well, they gave me that wager back. The Shohei Ohtani MVP bet, that is still booked though, so that can still take place and still potentially happen. But we even saw some movement. There, typically, futures have a lot of movement, but we saw some future movement today, Brett, with some very interesting news as soon as we were about to record. This came around with the Patriots. We're going to shift into the NFL now. Cam Newton, 1 year deal to New England.
Yeah, very incentive laden deal. Seems like you can get up to 7.5 mil, which is what's being reported out there. Good for them. I guess Bill Belichick loves Auburn quarterbacks because he's now added Cam Newton to Jarrett Stidham's QB room. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but I think it's a smart play for New England. I think Buffalo still has to be your favorite in the AFC East. Cam Newton has not won an NFL start in his last 8 starts. That's over 2 years. So you have to be leaning Buffalo, but obviously Cam Newton's an elite talent.
He is obviously an elite talent, and that's why the futures of the New England Patriots Super Bowl odds at the Caesars Palace Sportsbook in Las Vegas, they bumped up because of Cam Newton getting signed. They went from 25 to 1 odds to 20 to 1 odds. So you're making 5 times less if that were to happen, if that scenario were to take place of the Patriots winning the Super Bowl, if you made that bet after Cam was signed as opposed to right before. Futures, they move around a lot though, so that could dip right back down to 25 within the next 2, 3 weeks for all we know.
Yeah, I mean, people probably saw Cam Newton signed and immediately wanted to bet it, and it probably caused the line to move a little bit. And I'm sure the longer you wait, you'll see it move again. Maybe not all the way to 25. Maybe it hits 23 to one. Like you just never know. But yeah, I expect to see a lot of line movement with New England leading up to this season. There's just so many questions there.
Well, one of the questions, Brett, that you posed to me before the show was, do you think Cam had been signed and the Patriots were trying to cover something up? Because this wasn't the only news that came out about New England this evening.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed odd that these stories were released together. Like, didn't it seem kind of odd to you?
The timing was a little too close, I agree.
But I'm not saying they both couldn't have happened today. I'm just saying like the timing was weird.
The rumors around Cam Newton and the Patriots have been happening for months, so the fact that this doesn't happen until June 28th, and then it happens the same day that the Patriots lose their TV crews for the entire season, are fined over $1 million, and lose the third round draft pick in the 2021 draft. It looks like it might be a little bit of a PR move where they were waiting to play their card. They knew something like this might be coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I'm with you, Higgins. I think they might have been hanging on to this news for a day. They might really need it, and I think it came. Now, for the penalties, I think that's pretty significant because I think the Patriots were going to beat the Bengals no matter what. But they the third round pick, like that's a pretty big deal for New England. That's where they draft a lot. They traded a fourth round pick and got Randy Moss once. So they they know how to maneuver draft capital. So anytime you're penalizing them in the draft, I think that hurts them.
The Patriots are masterminds at compensatory draft picks, at trading to get value of draft picks to package later on. They really use draft picks and the NFL draft unlike most other NFL teams, and you are starting to see a shift of other teams be protective of their draft picks, kind of like this. New England, they'll basically let any player go for the right compensatory draft pick price. I mean, Chandler Jones went to the Cardinals and they got, I think, a second rounder for him. I mean, he's still an all pro defensive end, but you're getting good value in return instead of just letting a player leave during free agency, which is what the Patriots do time and again. But I don't want to be talking about their draft prowess. I want to be talking about the Patriots again infracting the rules and how this again tarnishes the New England dynasty that we have seen over the past 2 decades. Because we have seen the amazing tandem of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, but are they really all that they've been crapped out to be? Because they've been caught with Spygate, they've been caught with Deflategate. Is this going to be called Spygate 2.0? I mean, there's been a lot of circumstantial, interesting evidence that has popped up that show they do go beyond the conventional methods to get information and prepare for their opponents, and it's not necessarily an even playing field.
I think "Do Your Job Gate" because like that was the name of the docu series or whatever. That's what I'm going with.
Do your job, Gate. I like it. I think we can get some legs going with that. Maybe we'll see it trending on Twitter soon. Do your job, Gate. Come on, let's get it going. But the NFL did have some other news. I mean, NFLPA chairman DeMaurice Smith, he's not really that happy right now because Tom Brady, for one, players are continuing to work out at facilities, which is against the union advisory regarding health and safety with coronavirus right now. I mean, we saw the spikes in Tampa Bay with the numerous different sports teams. Tom Brady's continuing to work out with his team and with different players right now. I understand as a new player in a new system, you want to get as many reps and as much time in with those guys as possible. But as the veteran leader that he is inevitably stepping into that locker room to be, I don't know if that is the right move to be making. I don't think I can support that.
Yeah, I mean, Tom's at a weird spot where he's under a lot of pressure to perform this season. And he's probably feeling a little bit of that pressure, and maybe he's not making the I don't know, the best decision for his team. You're right. He probably should be taking some more precautions. But he probably feels that public pressure to perform. I think Tampa Bay is one of the favorites at most sports books. So there's a lot of pressure on Tom, I think.
At least at the Oregon Sportsbook, I'm looking it up right now.
They're the fifth favorite on FanDuel. It goes KC, Baltimore, San Francisco, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. That's to win the championship. To win the NFC, it is San Francisco, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, then Dallas. But Dallas is America's team, so I'm sure they don't actually believe it's Dallas, but that's where the odds are.
In Oregon, the Bucks are also in fifth. It's Kansas City, Baltimore, San Fran, New Orleans, Tampa, Dallas. So we'll see. Tampa does have some high expectations on them. I mean, they even had high expectations last year with Jameis. So you have to imagine adding Tom Brady instead of Jameis only throws fuel on that fire in a sense. I think, though, that it is the wrong message that a veteran, many people will call him the GOAT of Tom Brady. He's sending the wrong message by not listening to the union because it hurts the union in terms of its own negotiating. We saw how the union did not do and get everything that they wanted with the CBA this year. I think Tom Brady needs to understand it's not just his team that he is a leader for, but it is literally the entire NFL and the players involved with it that they look at him and they see, well, if Tom Brady's working out with his team, you better be damned, I'm going to work out with my team. I have to get those reps in too.
Well, you know our stance on social distancing. I made you move to Oregon. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think you should be distancing, especially in Florida where it's spiking right now. But like I said, I understand an athlete's mindset too, and to be honest, I'm sure he's feeling excited for this opportunity, but I'm sure he's a little nervous for this. He has a lot to prove this season, and I think that's part of the motivation for all these workouts. Now, to your point, I wish he would send his offensive lineman out to. I won't use Oregon. I'll use Washington.
Well, the NFL isn't the only one running into issues. I mean, the MLB, they're working on trying to get back right now. In fact, on Sunday, they had the teams release 60-man rosters. At least most teams released the full 60-man roster. Baltimore, I believe, only released 44. But there were some interesting notes for some of these teams. I mean, Most notably, the Rays were the first ones out, and they put a pretty notable prospect of Water Franco, uh, the 19-year-old shortstop. He's making the cut. He's coming up from single A ball from last year and is going to try to make an impact at the higher level.
Yeah, a lot of people are high on him this year. They thought he might make it up in a 162 game season, and now with these expanded rosters, maybe he does make his way onto a major league roster. The Rays won 100 games last year, so they're a pretty good team. Now, they're built a little bit more like how the A's build their team versus, like, say, the Yankees. And it will be interesting how these divisions play into it. But if the Rays are a playoff team and they think he can uh, be a bat and a fielder that could be an impact player in the postseason, absolutely call him up. Why not?
Well, I think giving your prospects a chance in these shortened seasons is a very smart move, to be honest. I mean, 60 games is a lot more like the length of a college season than it is an MLB season. So you're going to have these young guys that if they can get out and have that strong start, like you see a lot of the younger baseball players have nowadays, there isn't the dog days of August or the just boiling heat of the summer where everyone's already played 80 games or something and they're getting tired and they're just not focusing. This is a short window. I think it's going to benefit the youth. I think it's going to benefit those younger guys being able to just get out on a hot start and keep their streaks going potentially. And I think it allows some of these teams to take a risk in a smaller sample size and let these kids see what the big leagues are like.
Yeah, I mean, devil's advocate, they could start out cold and never get a chance to heat up.
That is obviously the other side of the coin, yes.
Uh but like, I think I mentioned a guy to you during our pregame or our pregame, our pre-show rundown. Uh Bobby Witt, who's going to be on the Royals 60 man whatever. But like I expect him to kind of just chill at the minor league station or wherever the minor league team's capped with the extra 20 people and play in those simulated games or whatever and be around his professional coaching. But, uh, I don't really expect to see Bobby Witt on the non competitive Royals. Like, that doesn't really make sense. But with the Rays and Franco, like a team that I'm not going to put them in my favorites to be competing for a title this year, but realistically could be in that hunt. It makes a lot of sense. You always go for a title when you can get it, whether it's 60 games or 162. You're playing to win.
I think the Rays have to be in the conversation for a playoff spot, whether it is the AL East spot or it's a wild card spot. I think the Rays are going to be one of the favorites in the AL East to find one of those spots. I'm interested to see how these division specific schedules are going to look, though, because it allows for great disparity. I mean, there's obviously difference in competition in some of these conference or some of these divisions, and I'm very curious to see how the weaker divisions will play out, how some of the stronger divisions will play out, and what impacts those can have on maybe taking futures, maybe just the day-to-day betting once baseball starts back up. But I have a feeling that there could be a few unexpected surprises making it into the playoffs because of this weird scheduling format that doesn't see everyone playing each other, but really you're just staying within your own division and then the league's equivalent of your own division.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the East, which encompasses both the AL and NL East, that's why it's the East. Um, I think that's probably the toughest, no questions asked. You have the Yankees, you have the Braves, you have the Mets, you have the World Series champ Nationals, you have the Phillies who improved this year, actually added some Yankees and Mets. So those teams are really good. The Blue Jays are very young, so maybe you handicap them very talented. The Rays, like we mentioned already, won 100 games last year. The Red Sox still have Devers and Bogarts and JD Martinez and Benedetti. So, sure, no Chris Sale, no Mookie Betts, but they got Verdugo back. So, the Red Sox are still plenty talented. And then that really only leaves the Marlins, who improved a little bit this offseason. They're still a step below the other four teams in the NL East,
They might have
and
a rough season.
yeah,
They might have
and
a rough 60 games.
and the Baltimore Orioles, who are definitely in for a rough 60 games. But
Yes.
um, to your point, I think I would handicap teams in the NL Central. I'd probably give them all a little boost, like the Cubs and Brewers, because they get to play against the AL Central, and that's the Royals, that's the Tigers. Now it's also the Cleveland Indians, who are pretty good right now. The Minnesota Twins could be pretty good again. So we'll see what happens, but definitely getting the Royals and the Tigers in there is an advantage for the Cubs, for the Brewers.
I think that Central will be a very interesting spot, and we could see some surprises come out of it. I mean, with 60 games, each game has so much more significance than in the 162. Every win means just that much more in a sense because there's just that much less time to make up for it in the span of the season. So having a few more of those easy series, whether it's playing in the Central and playing some of those teams that you just mentioned, or having a very competitive East or the West, which is kind of all over the place. That could be a wild card in itself on how sparingly different and wide in talent those West teams are and how they can shape up for a 60 game season. I think that there's a lot to mull over and consider with the way that these are scheduled if you're going to look at futures for the MLB playoffs of who's going to make it. I think there's going to be some surprise teams that make it through, whether it's going to be one wild card team, whether it's going to be a wild card team in the NL and the AL. Who knows? I'm not sure. I think it's going to be interesting. I also think whatever NL team does the best at integrating a universal DH the quickest will have a tremendous advantage over their counterparts because that is going to be something rather new for these NL teams, the universal designated hitter.
Yeah, it's probably why you should redraft your fantasy leagues. Someone on this podcast. But, uh, you know, I think the universal DH teams are going to figure it out. Like, the Mets are gonna all of a sudden have a spot for Cespedes, right? Or Dominic Smith. Two players that we weren't sure what we were gonna see of them this year because of roster spots. I'm sure Starling Castro plays a little more for the Nationals now. So like teams will figure it out. They may not all look like the American League DH, the lefty power bat, but these NL teams will get good quality at bats in there. One thing that's interesting, speaking of the DH to me, Aristides Aquino, it was pointed out to me from my day job. My guy Craig Mish and Joe Pisapia, they pointed it out for me, and it was really important information, I thought, so I'm going to share it with our listeners. Aristides Aquino was put in the minor league camp for the Reds. And this is interesting because we're playing a 60 game season, which is
And he
pretty
caught
much,
fire last year.
yeah, and he pretty much only played 60 games. He played 56 games and he hit 19 home runs. Like, you'd think that's a bat. Maybe
He
he's not
took
the
over
greatest.
Sports Center last
Yeah.
summer. I mean, he was amazing. He was hitting, I think he hit 11 home runs in like the span of like 2 to 3 weeks or something insane. He was on an incredible roll as soon as he got called up, showing power that no one really expected from a player at that position because I believe he's a shortstop.
No.
Is he an outfielder?
Yeah, but
Okay.
no one expected it because he was not a highly thought of prospect. Like
Ah.
he came out of nowhere.
It's a very interesting move when you see teams like the Tampa Bay Rays who are taking chances on a 19-year-old prospect and giving him a spot, but yet a prospect last year that I would say proved himself of Aquino is getting sent to the minors camp. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he won't be on the majors roster come the 60 game season, but it's not a good sign.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting, and like you said, he hit 19 home runs in 56 games. Like that could realistically lead the league this year.
So, what are some things that you're going to be considering and looking at over this next month as we prepare for the MLB to start again? Are you going to be looking at futures, or are you going to be trying to look at what teams are best to hit the ground running for your day of picks?
My favorite bet is Yankee overs. Now, opening day, I will not be touching that. If it's Scherzer versus Cole, I'll come back day two. Actually, well, that could be Corbin, or it could be Strasburg. So maybe I just sit that series out. But uh, the Yankees overs is something I always like, and now with a healthy Judge and Stanton, yes, please. But I think the most important thing to do when handicapping everything is to evaluate bullpens because bullpens are going to be really who's pitching this year. I mean, yeah, you'll have a Scherzer, you'll have a Garrett Cole, you'll have a Zach Greinke, a Kershaw, right? But outside of the top guys, I think you're going to see a mishmash of pitchers throughout the season.
The Washington Nationals included 36 pitchers in their 60 player pool. So the Nationals understand what pitching is going to mean for this. I was looking at this. You talked about MLB fantasy drafts a little bit earlier. Wink, wink, nudge, nudging me. I had a draft. Yes, that did already happen. I had an MLB draft, and it was up in the air with the coronavirus. So my thought was take as many aces as I could because if there was a shortened season, I didn't know if it would mean that there would still be a full 5 man rotation or if there would be a bigger workload for the aces, maybe a little bit or what have you. So I took Bueller, I took Kershaw, I took Strasburg, I took uh, Scherzer. I took all the aces that you know are going to come out and perform well. So I think looking at it like that, looking at the pitchers, there is going to be a lot of bullpen action and bullpen movement, but I don't know how much the rotations are going to get affected.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much out of control. Like, I mean, we're talking about COVID. Like, Rudy Gobert, for instance, hasn't even 100% recovered, and he was like patient zero. Like,
Yeah,
he shut down America.
I think that's a great time to switch over to the NBA. Yeah, Rudy Gobert, who is the player that shut down the NBA and ultimately sports because he tested positive for coronavirus in Oklahoma City, he is still having issues with his sense of smell. He tested positive in March, and it's near the end of June now, and 3 months later, he still says his smell isn't back to 100%. That's scary.
Yeah, no, it's definitely raises some eyebrows. And you mentioned Wilson Chandler was gonna sit out today. Like, you get why people are sitting out. Like, it's just not worth it to them. To others, they don't think it's as big of a risk, and that's like what you have here is everyone's got to make the best decision for them.
Now, here is a weird question, though. Joking, obviously, but Rudy Gobert having a lack of a sense of smell right now. NBA, you are up against some big, smelly guys in the heat of the moment of a basketball game. Come that fourth quarter, no one smells that great. Is that a little bit of a competitive advantage for Gobert?
Well, it's a disadvantage when he goes back to Paris, though. So, like,
Yes.
he can't smell any of the flowers or the croissants. So, it's like you win some, you lose some.
Yes. The NBA, they are also still working on their active rosters. I mean, the NBA wanted the players to announce by June 24th. Most teams we saw were saying July 1st is their specific deadline, so we're going to be coming up in the next couple of days getting these final NBA rosters, it seems. But the NBA has some interesting questions when you start looking at the upcoming season and the futures that there are that are available. If a player does test positive for coronavirus, I mean, MLB, we were just talking about, they have 60-man rosters that they just announced. That's much bigger in size than the NBA. If an MLB player tests positive, they go on a coronavirus specific injured reserved list and they're out for an undefined amount of time. The NBA, those rosters aren't as big. What impact can the coronavirus have for some of these teams if one or two players were to get hit? And who would you say are the most balanced teams that would be able to sustain something like that? So, for example, I thought of this and I was thinking if James Harden or Russell Westbrook ends up unfortunately catching coronavirus, I don't like the Rockets' chances. I don't know how deep they are beyond their two superstars. You look at the Lakers, though, I think LeBron or AD would be able to carry the weight while the other one is out. I think that there are going to be coronavirus cases that pop up during these seasons. We've seen it with the UFC, we've seen it with golf. We're going to see it with these other sports. It's just what's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how bad does it happen. It's going to pop up and in some way, shape, or form. And I'm kind of curious of the betting impacts of that on teams if you're looking at futures of teams that have a run at a championship or what have you, and what teams from top to bottom seem to be the most even that they'd be able to plug and replace injuries and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's probably why I'm not going to bet very many futures at all this year, right? It's
Yes.
like there's so much out of your control. Like, I mean, you don't even really normally handicap like a quarterback injury in the NFL, right? Like, you're like, oh, if everyone's healthy, like, do I think this team hits this win? Like, you're not like, oh, I think their quarterback's going down in week 4. Like, here's $100 on the under. Like, no
Yes.
one does that. But I think I would stick to the game to game betting, but a team that I like in the East that's pretty, I don't know, spread out depth wise. The Sixers have probably the best starting five in all of basketball, maybe up there. It hasn't all clicked, but honestly, this hiatus might have helped it because tensions might have been running high in the locker room. So I don't know how they'll come out, but just pure talent, their starting five can go 5 on 5 with anyone. So if they were to lose a starter, they'd still have 4 very high end starters on their roster.
I think the Sixers are an interesting team. I think the Celtics are an interesting team that also hasn't quite lived up to their potential yet this year, and they could benefit from this time off potentially. I'll be very curious to see as these teams get more back into their training camps and they start their formal practices and all that, and there's more
I
contact
mean,
and
I'm sorry to cut you off. Toronto, as well, is obviously a team that spreads out their talent very
yes,
well. So
yes, you are right. Toronto's
I
a great
think
one to
I
throw in there
think
as
these
well.
Eastern Conference teams probably more so. The Western Conference teams maybe a little more top heavy.
Yes, and I'll be very interested to see as these teams start their training camps and their formal facilities leading up to the season with more interactions with more people, what is that going to mean in terms of cases? We've seen the NBA's coronavirus case rate is around 5.3%. I mean, that's lower than the United States right now, but it's not as low as, let's say, the MLS, who's gearing to get back in Orlando as well, who's down at 2.7% right now.
Yeah, that seems like a good number, 2.7%.
Yes. But the NBA, they have some interesting things to look at in terms of betting. We have the futures in terms of the NBA champion. I heard something on sports radio the other day that actually did kind of make a lot of sense to me. Is we've never seen a fully healthy LeBron in the NBA playoffs. He's gonna be as close to that as he has ever been because he has had this long hiatus to recover from whatever nagging injuries he may have had this season. A fully healthy LeBron and a fully healthy Anthony Davis is scary for the rest of the league. It is terrifying, even at LeBron's current age.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's kind of why I'm bullish on the Rockets. I think Russell Westbrook and James Harden are two of the better isolation basketball players in the league. And with COVID going around in Florida, I'd want as few people touching the basketball as possible.
Well, then James Harden might be your most friendly player.
You know what? It's not fair. James Harden gets a lot of assists too, but yes, he dribbles the heck out of the basketball. As my guy Bob Knight would say, he's dribbling the air out of the ball. But he's an elite scorer in this league, and he does it in a variety of ways. Excuse me. He can hit the three, he can finish at the rim, he gets fouled, and those skills will translate whether you've been playing every day for the last 6 months or you got a 3 month break. Like, those are valuable skills. Russell Westbrook, he doesn't shoot the three as well, but he, will take an open three. He can occasionally make it. He can absolutely finish at the rim, and he's not afraid to go to the free throw line either.
And the strengths in James Harden's skill set, those are all things that can be worked on by yourself in
Yes.
a gym without players. So he could have just been working on his dribbling and his 3-point shooting and his catch and release and things of that nature. That he doesn't really need to run a 3-on-3 or a team practice to get reps in with. He can work on his ball handling by himself. He can work on his outside shots by himself. So that's a little bit of an interesting takeaway from it as well. The NBA definitely has a lot of questions as we look ahead towards what this season could be, because I see there more likely being a surprise in the MLB, like we were talking about, than there being a surprise in the NBA in terms of a team sneaking into the playoffs that necessarily shouldn't, or even taking a deep run at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the funny thing about the NHL is that their lottery went off before the season restarted, and that like I think I have this correct, but a playoff team won the lottery, right?
Yeah,
That's what
I
the
saw something weird about that too. Yes,
so
so
now they're having another lottery. Hey, the NHL, man. Like, they came out here with a half baked plan and they gave it to us, and we're like, you gave us no dates, no cities, like no agreement. You came out here with like we're gonna do it in phases, and we're gonna have 24 teams, and we'll get back to you.
so the saddest thing about the NHL draft lottery to me, the poor Detroit Red Wings. They only won 17 games this season. Should have had the top pick. They should have had the best chance for the top pick, and instead they're picking fourth. Sounds like the Knicks.
Get Dylan Larkin out of Detroit. That guy is a stud. He needs to be on a competitive team. He is too good for where that franchise is now. And it's sad because Hockey Town USA, I know they don't play at Joe Louis Arena anymore, but that place was rocking for what, like 26 consecutive years of Detroit Red Wings playoff appearances?
Yeah, so this NFL draft lottery is just crazy. There's 8 teams that are playing for this qualifying round in the expanded playoffs, and one of those 8 teams in a second NHL draft lottery are going to be up for potentially getting that top pick. And they would then be followed by the Los Angeles Kings, the Ottawa Senators, Detroit Red Wings, the Senators again, because the Senators' first pick at number 3 is actually from the Sharks. then the Anaheim Ducks at 6, New Jersey Devils at 7, and the Sabres at 8. It was just it, this is not how it was supposed to go at all. There was supposed to be the number one draft pick walking across the stage on Friday night with the NHL draft. Instead, he's still waiting to see where he might go. But if I was Alexis Lafreniere, I'd be kind of happy because it sounds like you're going to a better team than you should be.
Yeah, well, that's good. So that's much better than the going to Detroit and playing on a 17-win team.
It's a little bit more hopeful than the number one pick constantly getting drafted by the Browns every single year in the NFL, for example. But the NHL, we just talked about the draft lottery. Uh, I'm starting to wonder, though, how much of an advantage it actually is for these four teams in each conference that are getting this uh, bye, that I guess they're calling it, or the round robin that they're playing for their seeding. Because they've been off the ice for so long. I'm wondering if these best of fives for the qualifying rounds are going to help some of those teams catch a head of steam and get their ice legs back under them. And by the time they meet those top teams in each conference, it's going to be a much different story because those guys don't have their legs quite under them yet in terms of competition of the NHL players that have just played a best of five series.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. I think underdogs are always live in the NHL. We see it all the time. Last year, the best team in hockey lost in the first round to an 8 seed. So, and it wasn't even close. It was like in 4 games.
Yeah,
So, you know, I don't know. Does it make them more alive? Maybe. Does it increase their chance for being more beat up and the other team's healthier? Also, maybe. So hockey's a brutal sport. It's a physical sport. You probably want fresh bodies, but I understand your point in the sense that, yeah, you also want some reps on those bodies.
I'm just thinking. So let's use the Pittsburgh Penguins for an example. They're in the qualifying round, so they're going to have to play a best of five. Giving Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and the rest of that team up to 5 games to get back into sync and playing competitive hockey compared to their cross state rivals, the Philadelphia Flyers, who, with their win streak that they were red hot from in 2020, squeaked into that last spot of being one of the top four teams. I almost wonder if where the Penguins are at might be more beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure if you asked the Lightning last year, they'd like, shit, we'd take the bye. So you never, like, you never know, man. You never know.
And then it would be a best of seven series anyway. So even if it does give the qualifying teams an advantage, hopefully after the first or second game, it's back to an even slate in terms of competitive ability between these two teams. The NHL, though, I mean, you mentioned you're probably not going to be taking many futures for the rest of the year. I think I'm basically right there with you. I just don't trust that everything's going to actually finish it. I think it's going to start back up. But I'm worried, Brett. I'm worried that they're gonna start back up, but not actually be able to finish for whatever reason, whether it be coronavirus or strikes or whatever it might be. I'm not even gonna try to predict the future because 2020 has showed us that is a waste of goddamn time to try to because everything just goes wrong.
I'll tell you what, NHL, I probably would lean underdogs as a general statement. Like, there may be a game here or there where I'm like, nah, I don't see Pittsburgh or Washington or I don't know, a heavy favorite losing, right? But generally speaking, it might just be like, let me take all 5 underdogs today and see what happens.
So I'm looking at the Oregon Sportsbook right now for the NHL futures in terms of what they look like. And in terms of the outright winners, Tampa Bay is the favorite. They're tied with Boston at plus 650, followed by the Avalanche and the Golden Knights at plus 850. The Caps at 900 and the Flyers at plus 1,000. That's the top six. I think that there's some good value near like the bottom though. You look at a team like literally these bottom two teams, the Montreal Canadiens or the Chicago Blackhawks, who severely underperformed this year, but both have great goaltenders. And we've talked about this before, Brett, about how this could be an opportunity for goaltenders to just click all of a sudden and have a completely different season than they did before the coronavirus started and could basically help secure win the Stanley Cup for their team. I mean, at plus 8,000, it's almost just worth throwing a dollar on.
I kind of like some of these bets that FanDuel has out here. It's the NHL series bets, and you can pick like for instance Arizona Nashville, right? Arizona
Hmm.
plus 110, Nashville minus 134. So here's one that I might throw a little bit of money on. Not probably not a full unit. Probably not today, but I kind of caught my attention. Chicago versus Edmonton. Chicago plus 134, Edmonton minus 164. I don't know. Chicago could definitely win that series. Jonathan Tays, Patrick Kane, uh,
What'd you say those odds were? Because I'm looking at that in Oregon right now, and those numbers don't sound nearly what I'm reading here.
Chicago's plus 134,
Okay,
Edmonton's
Chicago's plus 140 here.
okay, and Edmonton's minus 164.
Edmonton's minus 160 here. So if you want to save 4 pennies.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be betting that much. But Chicago definitely entices me there. They have a lot of talent, like, and they've had 3 months off, so it doesn't matter that Duncan Keith's, 37 years old. Like, he's fresh.
I agree. And Chicago, that is a team that has been to the Stanley Cup before. They still have those pieces that made it there with them in terms of Crawford, Kane, Duncan. It is
Taves.
going it Taves. It's going to be a very very interesting expanded playoff setting that the NHL is. And I'm also very interested to see which of those qualifying teams is going to get the top pick in the draft because it seems like you get to have your cake and eat it too in this scenario if you're them.
Yes, definitely.
One last thing, I mentioned the MLS very briefly. They are supposed to start their MLS's back tournament, Brett. You and I suggested they go back to the drawing board and try to think of a new name for that. Apparently they haven't. It's still the MLS's back. They're not Michael
Tournament.
Jordan. They're not
MLS
Michael
is
Jordan. They can't
MLS is
just.
back tournament.
Yes. Well, they've had 26 positive coronavirus cases. 24 of those were before the teams traveled to Florida, but two tested positive once they got to Central Florida. So, while that sounds like a large amount of players, 668 players have been tested, so the MLS has a 2.7% positive test rate, which I mentioned compared to the NBA's 5.3 sounds pretty good. It's about half. And then when you look at it at the United States overall, the United States is at 8.2%. 2.7 sounds very manageable compared to 8.2.
Yeah, well, you know, the NBA is all listening to the same guidelines. It's tougher when South Carolina and Georgia and North Carolina and whatever are all all those states just doing different things. I mean, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Ohio, like all those states doing different things. So it's always going to be different results everywhere when you do like that. If you come together with guidelines and everyone follows them, you'll probably have more consistent results throughout your entire bubble.
Well, the MLS, they're supposed to start on July 8th, so we will see how that goes. It's all 26 teams resuming their season on July 8th, and I guess the MLS is back. We will see how that works. We have also been, I don't know about you, Brett, I've still been dabbling in the international betting with some KBO. Chinese basketball started back up. EuroLeague's basketball have started back up. There's a lot more options that we have now. And I've been doing some more of those international bets again, and it's been working out well for me this week. I'm going to start posting some more of those onto social media again. So that make sure to follow us, Next Best Bet on Facebook, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and at NBB Pod on Twitter. And it's all right above us in that banner above. We we have some more picks that we'll be giving out, Brett, but episode 56, it's going to be chock full of them with another weekend full of golf, NASCAR, UFC. We're going to have a lot coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And, it was fun this weekend. Hopefully, we can make some more money next weekend.
Well, we will see how we do. Make sure to follow us on social media, like I said, in the meantime, as we'll be giving out picks in between episodes. Also, we're posting some of our daily content there as well. This has been episode 55 of The Next Best Bet. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk to you again on Thursday.